once I get to a certain level, I'm going to do everything I can to never drop below that. Whether that's like in an account balance, whether that's like the amount that I'm saving, whether that's my income level, all these things. Like I always want to just be like leveling up.
Welcome to the Impactful Engineer Project. I'm Steve Maxey, and with my co-host and brother Jake, we are here to bring you guidance, fresh ideas, and the tools to help you become an impactful engineer.
All right, hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Impactful Engineer Project. This will be one of our interview guest episodes, one of our long-form episodes. I've got Steven, of course, with me. This is Jake Maxey, your host today. And today we have Ryan Sullivan on the show. He is a registered professional engineer, works in the same industry I do. So right on, brother. And yeah, we'll get into some interesting stuff today. He is starting his own, financial advisory business, right? And knows a lot about that stuff. And so we want to bring him on the show to share some tips and tricks, share what he has going on. And I know you're going to get some value out of it today. And also just to hear a little bit about, his engineering journey and how he got into engineering and maybe a little bit about his background there as well. So take it away, Ryan. Thanks for coming on.
Great. Well, yeah, I appreciate you guys having me. We had touched base a while ago, Jake, and kind of followed along what you guys have been working on. And so it's been cool to see the project coming to fruition, and I'm excited to chat.
Right on. So what's been happening lately?
Big question. Yeah. I mean, the biggest news, yeah. So my background is as an engineer, like you mentioned, run a department of engineers, and but about a year ago, we launched a financial advisory, financial planning firm that specializes in working with architects and engineers, and so that's been kind of the focus these days, and so looking to get into all that.
So still working full time and launching this side business as well. Busy guy.
Yeah, I hear that. Like everyone I tell, they say you must be busy, and it's like if you ask my wife, the answer is yes. I pretty much just work all the time.
I say scheduled. I say these days I'm just very scheduled. Do I know what I'm doing in the next hour? Yeah, it just so happens I do, right? How do you get all that done?
Time management's key.
Yeah, exactly. My days are full and I plan it out purposely that way. So, because I get the same questions. And in fact, it's like, do you ever sleep? Well, yeah, I do. I get like 8 hours, good solid 8 hours of sleep a night, man. Sometimes 10 if I need it. So... but yeah,
there's just not a lot of room for fluff.
That's right. There's not a lot of room for
you
error.
kind of move from one thing to the next. And I had a mentor of mine at one point in time. Have you ever heard of the 168, like the principle of 168?
I have not.
Share it with us.
So he used to always present it. So he's like, do you know what 3.14 is?
Pi.
Pi, yeah. Like engineers, you should know pi.
Yep.
Well, 168. So that's the number of hours you have in a week. So 24 times 7, 168. And he would break it down. So, most people sleep, 40 to maybe 50 hours a week. You work 40 to 50 hours a week, maybe with some travel time and stuff. And then, so right there, so call it 100. And then you've got miscellaneous time as well. So you got to eat, shower, hopefully, change your clothes, whatever. There's probably, 3-ish hours a day there. So times by 7, that's 21.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're left over with quite a bit of time at that point in time. So I think it's about, well, I don't want to do math on the spot.
You got like 30, 40 hours to really, or maybe 30 only.
Yeah. So it's 47 is what that comes down to. So
right.
You got 47 hours left over at that point in time. And so what are you doing with that? Was he kind of always asked. And there's a lot of time left over, and I think a lot of it just ends up getting wasted. A lot of it's the transitions in between these different things, and people don't realize like how much time they're scrolling on social media, or they're just sitting around not really doing anything. Mm-hmm. And with better time management and kind of more intentional time usage, you can get a lot out of that. So I just thought that was kind of it's always a fun question because people never know, and it's like, you budget for your finances, hopefully, maybe, but no one really budgets their time. And it's probably even more valuable to do that.
Yeah, the 168. Okay. I've done an exercise that kind of brings that to light, like how, planning your day and then seeing how much time you're wasting or whatever, but just calling it the 168. Yeah, that's fun. And it kind of like, that's surprising that it is a ton of time. You would think that it wouldn't be a lot of time left over once you start counting all the things you have, like quote unquote, have to do, just to survive.
Yeah, I mean, in theory, it's the same amount of time you're sleeping, the same amount of time you're working, So to throw a second job in there or a side business, I guess.
Yeah. And then, working out and, trying to stay healthy, and then obviously time with
Yeah,
family is important, and then chores and all that stuff. But yeah, you got to spend it wisely or else you'll run out of that real quick.
Yeah,
for
and
sure.
most people will just waste it, watching TV or something, It's 2 hours a
But
day.
it's so much fun.
I know, but
Got to catch up on the latest show,
yeah,
Steve.
but I mean, 2 hours a day, that's 14 hours in a week that you're just sitting, and that's a lot of
Yeah.
productivity that's lost. So yeah,
So that was a big, yeah, that was a big epiphany for me. Just kind of my background. So I went to school for engineering, got a job in the field, designing HVAC, plumbing, mechanical systems, and I realized, coming home after work, I'm early 20s, and it's like maybe play a little bit of video games or watch some TV, and I guess I would usually go to the gym too. So I go to the gym, come home, eat, do that, single at the time, and it was like 3 hours a night, roughly doing whatever. And at a certain point, I was like, hey, like, I could probably do something else with this that might, benefit me kind of long term. And so as a kid, I was really into reading, mainly just fiction and stuff. But I was like, hey, what if I started reading, nonfiction books on different areas? And I didn't have to necessarily give up all my TV time or, all the video games or whatever, but I took, an hour of that. And it was like, if I could read an hour a day and then watch TV for an hour, like I'm going to be way better off. And so that was probably one of the first kind of epiphanies I had as, a professional and after college. And I really attest a lot of, my success or what I've done to that because I learned so much and still do, from reading. And that really kind of accelerated my career path. And, a lot of my peers and other people weren't necessarily doing that. And
Hmm.
so the skills that I learned, the things I was exposed to, were huge just from, reading and researching and trying to teach myself
I
stuff.
think I think that's what happened with us too, Steve.
oh yeah, yeah.
I think I dove into it maybe just like a little earlier than you did, and like kind of like fell off the radar. You're like, "What's Jake doing?"
Yeah,
He started like reading books and stuff about, and started like spending hours doing other things. What the heck is he doing?
yeah. I mean, because a
But
book
that's how it starts.
a book has like a lifetime of experience in it, and so you can spend 6 hours, just as a random number, reading a book, and you gain 80 years of experience from the author or whatever it may be. And so you're like condensing that experience and knowledge and expertise and absorbing it yourself. So like reading is just like such a great fast track way of building your own experience through other people's experience. So that's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, certainly a faster way than waiting 80 years to figure it out. If you can read that in 8 hours or something, that's a
Oh
bit of
yeah.
a shortcut.
Yeah. So
Yeah, yeah.
tell us how you kind of came to the epiphany of wanting to do the financial side of it, and help other people, figure out how to manage their money or invest or, all those kind of things.
Yeah. Well, there's another epiphany kind of within that that's related to a book. So but stepping back a little bit, so I started working as an engineer, had been doing that for maybe a year and a half, maybe 2 years, and I just kind of started to question things a little bit. And so I was at a fairly large kind of regional architecture engineering firm, and my supervisor was the head of the mechanical engineers for that office. There's probably it was like 12 of us or so, something like that. And then his boss, who was the head of the mechanical engineers for the whole company. And so that was kind of like the career path I could see. It was like, over time I could move up to be, the manager for that office and then potentially, basically the manager for at the company level. And that was like kind of it. and then I saw the other people around me with varying levels of experience, and I was like, huh, so I've been here for 2 years, and I mean, obviously they know more than me. They're, more experienced and have more skills, but the work that they're doing isn't necessarily that much different than what I'm doing. And and then, they still kind of complained about their finances, or, the guy didn't have time to go to the gym, and or sending his kids to college and these types of things. And so that just kind of got me to question, was like, all I had known up to that point was like, go to school, get good grades, get a job, and I did that. And now what? And so that's what then kind of started the book reading and the research, and really it was investing in myself and trying to figure out, what else is out there, or what's next, or is this it? How does this really work now that I'm an adult and a professional? And so that started this long journey, and I'd always kind of been interested in the stock market, and so I started looking, heavily into that. I started learning about business and just, other ways to basically have an income. And what I saw was, the stock market and kind of investing is one of the probably more traditional or kind of typical paths for most people to get to a point where they don't necessarily have to work every day. And then, being a business owner or starting a business is another way to potentially kind of accelerate that as well, just with like higher income potential, ability to sell it, those types of things. And so that really kicked off, a very long journey of, exploring different avenues of how to do that, and learning and researching. And so I explored, looking at different types of businesses, buying, selling, starting, and kind of coming full circle, realized like a lot of my time had gone into personal finance, investing, markets, economics, these types of things. And a couple of years ago, I had just a chance interaction with a guy at the store, kind of a random deal, and he was also a professional engineer, licensed engineer, that had become a financial advisor. And so we kind of hit it off just with like similar backgrounds and interests. And I originally wanted to like hire him. I wanted him to manage my money. And he told me one day, he was like, I'm not going to manage your money. Like you know too much about this. Like you're going to be a pain in my ass, and you're going to ask me all these questions and question what I'm doing. And, I think you should really like explore this more. I think this is something that you're clearly, passionate about. And you're not like most of the people that walk into my office. And so that was like, huh, okay, maybe I should do more with this. And so then I kind of started, just spending more time on it, managing my money more, looking into different things. And then eventually, too, I'd started talking to friends and family and different people. I was like, hey, I have kind of an expertise in this. Like other people don't spend all of their time doing these things, which was a surprise at first. And, starting to realize the situations a lot of people are in, or how they manage their money, and just a lot of lack of education and training. And so it was like, well, I've always wanted to start a business. I haven't really figured out exactly what that should be, but now I've seen what that could look like. I've seen the potential. I have this experience, I have this background, I have this interest, and kind of all of these pieces kind of started to come together. And so about a year ago, basically was like, hey, I think this makes a lot of sense. And so I said I'd go for it.
That's awesome. What was the, so first when you're looking around and studying companies and because you talked about like trying to figure out how to make money through the stock market, but also how to make money through a business. But like, what was the journey before you made that realization that, hey, I'm going to jump into the financial advisory and planning business. But was there anything that you could share that was like, you were thinking about and now you think about it and go, oh my gosh, what if I did that? Or anything like that? Hey, my fellow impactful engineers, if there's one thing that you could do to help out this community, is to keep listening to the podcast, but also that if you found value in it, to share it with one person, give us a 5-star review, or even leave a text review. It'll only take a few seconds of your time. Find that person that you think could enjoy some of this or learn from it, and pass on the good word. Now back to the show.
Yeah, so I think, I guess I was going to tell a story about the book. So leading into that, I was on a business trip for work, and I am in Montana, and I was headed down to Wyoming, And there was two older engineers guys in the car, and one, for whatever reason, it was just dead silent. Like we didn't, this was a, I don't know, 6, 8 hour drive. Nobody talked like the entire time, no radio on, just like silence. And so I was in the back reading my book, and I was content. And so I was reading Think and Grow Rich. Have you guys read that
I
one?
love that book. Yeah. It's
Yep.
Napoleon Hill, right?
Yeah. And so, what's that?
It's Napoleon Hill. Is that who it was?
Yeah,
Okay.
Napoleon
There
Hill.
we go.
Yeah. Yeah. So I was reading this book, and I don't remember which part, but I got to this part, and basically I kind of had this epiphany around, like, I mean, the title of the book kind of explains the whole concept, and you're like, okay, yeah, sure, that's obvious, but at the time it was like this very profound kind of realization that's like all I have to do is just like think and then grow rich, right? Like you can basically, like, you can do whatever you want, and there's nothing really holding any of us back if you put your mind to it, or you try. And so that was a big turning point for me as far as like, well, I guess I forgot to mention I started crying. So I was like reading this book, I had this realization, I was just like crying, and I was trying to not make sure these other guys could like hear me or know what was going on. And so I don't know, that this is like a little awkward. But
No, I've
but
been
yeah, that
there.
was a
I've done
big
the
turn.
same thing.
Yeah, I've done it on planes as well. I was like sitting in first class, and like it's like, don't look at me. uh, but so that was a big kind of stepping point, or like, hey, I can do whatever. Like, I'm smart. I think I have what it takes. Like, other people aren't that much different than me. Why not try? And so along the way, I wanted to be a consultant. And so I read all this stuff about business, and I was like, hey, I'm gonna be a business consultant. And so I talked to, there was this one guy at my gym that he like made like dental molds and stuff, so like crowns and bridges and stuff like that. And he had a couple employees. And so I like kind of talked to him and was like trying to help him. And then around that time I moved. And when I moved, I used that as an opportunity. I guess that's another thing that I've always tried to do, is like, if to basically use your environment to your advantage. And if you change your environment, to use that as kind of a stepping point to make significant habits, or ritual changes or whatever in your life,
Yep.
to kind of move yourself forward. And so it's like, hey, I'm in a new place, new things. I'm gonna just start, reaching out to people and try and talk to them, and figure out how I can do this. And so I reached out to a bunch of people that were kind of related to business consultants and stuff. And I remember talking to one guy, and he was like, what do consultants sell? They sell their experience, and you don't have any experience because you've never had a business. So why would anybody hire you? And I was like, dang, that's,
That's a slap in the face.
I get it. Yeah, it was a bit of a slap. So that was a bit of a setback. And so then I was like, well, okay, maybe I'll just buy a business. And so I started talking to business brokers, and I learned about leverage buyouts and how you can use the assets of a business to basically purchase the business. And I talked to one business broker, and she was like, I've never heard of that. And I was like, huh, I read this whole book about it. I don't know.
That's interesting.
And so then there was one opportunity where there was this lumber mill. It was like a lumber mill in a town a couple hours away. It was like, I don't remember, it was like $5 million or something. And I was like, I think I should buy this lumber mill. And
Heck yeah,
that
you
was
should.
around the time I kind of met my now wife, and she tells the story as well. She was like, yeah, we first started hanging out, and you were like talking about buying this lumber mill. It's like, who is this guy? I'm like 25 probably. Like, I don't have $5 million, and I know nothing about lumber or running a business at the time. So those are a couple examples, but yeah.
That's awesome. Those are amazing. I want to go back real quick to like the whole it was awkward for you, but you were crying in the car or something. I've never, I think I've shared with like one person that I've had experiences like that, and it's my coach, because I felt comfortable enough talking to them about it. But like, it's great to hear you say it, because I don't know if you feel the same way, but it felt like it was just this release of like freedom, and like I'm aligned. I felt like I was really super just accepting of everything. Like there was nothing that could bother me. And the last one I had was like in the truck on the way back from, I think it was an ACE mentorship meeting. Had to have been like almost a year ago. But I'm just like driving back, and I just started my coaching, and I was like figuring out who I was and like where I wanted to put all this freaking energy that I had, because I needed somewhere to put it. And I've been getting pretty far, and then I just like started crying in the car. I was like, I don't know. I was listening to metal too. I'm like, dun, 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 and I was like, you know what? Like, and it just kind of the feeling just kind of came over me. I don't know if it was similar to you in your experience, but I was just like, damn, good thing I'm alone in this car. you know? But it's
Yeah,
a
I mean,
cool feeling.
I'm not definitely not a very emotional person. My wife can also attest to that. She calls me a robot.
Sure, we're engineers. Yeah.
Um, yeah, I think it kind of comes with the territory. But every once in a while, I kind of like you're saying, like things just kind of click, or you kind of just have this profound kind of realization or connection or whatever. And um, yeah, it's a cool experience, I think. I mean, usually there's something powerful that's happening, or some realization, and usually that provides a lot of kind of motivation or excitement to move forward in a direction. So
Yeah.
I look forward to when those experiences happen.
So put you on the spot, Steve. Have you ever had anything like that happen? Or are you still a robot through and through?
I I'm not as robotic as some, but as far as like emotional epiphanies, I don't think so, to be honest. But I mean, you know how I am. I do a lot of deep thinking, usually in the mornings, and I usually text you my epiphanies.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. You do.
I'm like, oh,
all the time.
it's like this big old paragraph, and I know you're just like, oh, jeez.
It's like Steve must be in the shower.
Yeah.
Why is he showering at 11:30? I don't know.
Yeah.
Great idea though. All right. This is really good stuff, guys. But I would hate it if we got through, 45 minutes and we didn't start talking about some finance stuff, or maybe tips and tricks for people, or get into that. So, Ryan, what do you want to start us off with?
Yeah, I think, just thinking back to, where I was and kind of early stages, in my career, working as an engineer and, seeing, and as I started to look at, different ways to make money, in the stock market, investing is definitely one of those ways. And if you think about, retirement and people retiring, that's probably the most kind of traditional or most common way these days. Back in the day, people had pensions. Those aren't very common anymore, and so now everyone's got their 401k plans, and they're just expected to figure it out. And I think that was, for me, I was like, well, there's a saying you guys probably heard, but if it's gonna be, it's up to me. And so it was like, well, I know that I don't want to necessarily have to work forever. I know that I want to have the ability to kind of control my time more. And not necessarily because I don't like what I'm doing, just because in general, like I want to make sure that at some point I'll be in that situation. And how am I going to do that? And so um, there's a so what I started doing was like kind of projecting out, my income and what I was saving, and looking at typical investment returns. And so now I've built like a little calculator to do this for people, and I can kind of plug in their numbers and we can look at it. But I call it like triple compounding. And so, the simple example I have is, for basically, I mean, and most people should really be able to do this regardless of kind of where you're starting. And so I call it the 20-year plan to become a millionaire. And so if you start out with $65,000 a year, in income, uh, and you have $0 invested, and you start off by investing, 10% of that income, so $6,500 a year, and you then work to increase your income by 8% a year, which is kind of a lot for like typical raises, but if you're moving up, and especially kind of in the early years, you can get fairly substantial bumps if maybe moving companies or, kind of switching things up. So just kind of averaged out over that time frame, 8% income increases. And then every year you work to invest, 1% more. So you started off at 10% of your income, and then 11%, and then 12%. And I think I capped that at a certain point too. And then, I use 7% as just kind of a average historical return, and that also factors in some inflation too. And so if you do that over 20 years, starting from zero, you would end up with, over $1 million. And so to me, that's just an example of, I mean, one, kind of the power of compounding, but two, if you're compounding your income increase, you're compounding how much you're actually putting away, and your investment itself is compounding, you can make some pretty substantial progress in a pretty quick period of time.
Yeah, and it's almost like, I mean, I see it as just an easy thing to just do 10%, just put it aside. And that return is going to be from things that you don't even have to touch. Like it's just people are, a company's going to manage the money for you, and there's fees and all this stuff that'll come out later. But, that 7%'s a realistic number in my experience and the planning I've done and the people I've talked to. So that's a safe number that I would say is a good return. And then just letting it sit and just forgetting about that 10%. That is, you don't make that money. That's just money that goes that way, and you don't think about it anymore. Like build that in year after year into your planning, pretending that you don't even make that money. And if you do it early, it's super easy to keep it going. Once you get like super high and then you're like, oh, I'm going to start a retirement fund, and then you take that 10% cut or 15%, you're like, oh my gosh, that's so much money. But just do it early and you won't even worry about it later.
Yeah, because you don't even notice, right? Because when you're younger, you're used to college income, which is dirt. And so, if you start out your first job and all of a sudden you're making, just say, $75,000 a year, you can instantly put in that $7,500 a year into investing, and you're still making a large chunk of money, way more than you used to be. And so your lifestyle still goes up, and you never miss that. And then, as you said, just, you keep, as you get your raises, you can keep increasing that contribution.
Now, what about, so I'm sorry to interrupt you, but if you could speak to like, what if somebody says, well, I have $100,000 in debt now because I went to school and I need to start paying that right away. So I'm going to put that 10% into that instead of investing. Like, do you have some people say that too?
Great question for sure. And so there's two ways I kind of look at that. I mean, in some, and a lot of this is going to be really case specific. So, always, I don't know what people's situations are, and it's always going to be a little bit different. But I had a client where he had some credit card debt and, some various means of debt, and it was like, hey, he really wanted to tackle it. And it was like, that's a great plan. Credit card debt, that's not great. Student loan debt, depending on the interest rate, can also, definitely eat at you. And so I made this whole plan for him, and it was like, all right, a couple months from now, you're going to be, no debt, and then things are going to be awesome. And then we'll kind of like readjust, and we basically took away all of his retirement contributions and saving, and was like, focus everything on the debt. Well, then what happened was he didn't really do that. And so now a couple months later, he still has the debt, and now he doesn't have the retirement or the savings. And from my perspective, it's like, hey, I made this plan, why don't you follow it? But when it comes to finances, there's so much, behavioral that kind of comes into it. And I think for a lot of people, and that's something that I've had to learn, in this role, helping people with that, is I can't expect people to just change their habits on a dime. Like people are entrenched in kind of those habits that they have and how they're doing things. And that, you really need to slowly kind of change those. And so, if someone wants to be really aggressive, then, I mean, if you look at kind of the percent interest you're paying and you compare that to what you expect you're going to get from an investment standpoint, then yeah, it's probably worth it to pay off the debt if that's higher. And so, anything over 7-8% and up, probably starts to make sense to focus in on that. But that being said, I also kind of think there's a place for a more sort of well-rounded strategy. And a lot of people say, I don't have any extra money. I don't have any money to invest or to save. And to your point before, it's like, well, if you, starting out right out of college, if you do that, or if you make a change, or, all of a sudden you suddenly have more income than you're used to, well, that's a great time to try to stash some of that away. If you don't fall into that camp, well, then it doesn't really matter where you start, just as long as you start. And so I think for most people, it's way harder to go from 0 to 1 than it is to go from 1 to 2. And so I like to try to set up, I call it like an automated cash flow system, and to basically help people, align where their money's going with their goals, and to start putting money to these different places, because, it's a lot easier to, hey, you get a raise and now you go from $50 a month to $100 a month. But if you're at zero, like it's a totally different story. And so I think that there's a lot to be said about, kind of, I call them buckets, and basically, categorizing and aligning these buckets in relation to your goals and your situation. And then from there, figuring out what you can afford to do or work to start putting money away to these different places. And then, you kind of do that at a bare minimum level to start. And then you're going to kind of focus in maybe on one goal at a time, or, maybe two or three, kind of depending on the situation. And then as your income goes up, or if those, debt drops off and you have more money available, then you can focus in on the next one. And so that's the way that I like to approach it with people.
Yeah, that's probably the good approach. And I was thinking about like, fitness as well. So it's like I used to write plans for people, and I see the same thing happen. It's like, man, if you would just execute this plan, you would be in great shape. You'd be ripped. You'd be lifting 1,000,000 pounds. And if you just eat the food, and like, I'm like, why aren't you doing this? But it's the same thing. You have those habits that you need to change, the mental blocks, So and the classic approach is to do one small step at a time. Take one small bite at a time. It's 1,000. What does he say? It's 1,000 gold BBs, not a silver bullet. Who was that? Alex Ramosi.
I haven't heard that one.
It's in business. I was listening to a business podcast, and it's like, and it made sense, but it makes sense across all these different avenues. It's not one big shiny thing that's going to get you across. It's all the little tiny habits, right? So, it was great advice.
When it comes to engineers, is there something that you've noticed that's pretty consistent with engineers, like as far as a financial challenge that they have, or tips that you tend to give to engineers specifically, and kind of how they overcome those?
Yeah. Yeah, so I think, most engineers, generally have access to a 401k. And so a lot of times that's kind of their primary, savings or investment vehicle. A lot of engineers also end up with ESOP, so employee stock ownership plans. And so a lot of just the way the companies are structured, they get access to that, or maybe there's a profit sharing plan. But those are probably kind of the main things I see that they get exposed to. You also have, firms with different kind of ownership structures. And so if they're, at my firm, you could become an associate and then associate principal and then a principal. And those are kind of varying levels of ownership in the company. And so those all kind of present themselves with, unique kind of challenges or, ways to navigate that. I think that, one thing I see with that a lot of times is, engineers are really focusing on their career and their work, which understandably so. And so a lot of times these things are kind of on the back burner, and they maybe don't give them the attention that they need, or it's not an interest of theirs, so they don't necessarily spend as much time as maybe they should, thinking about it. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of times what can happen is, maybe they make a decision to contribute a certain amount to one of those types of plans early on, and they don't really think about it anymore. And also, if it is like an ESOP or something like that, and they've got, stock ownership in the company, well, then usually they end up like heavily concentrated with that. And so, that's just one type of risk, kind of having most of your eggs or all of your eggs sort of in one basket. And I think that, that's an opportunity to, figure, not that it's bad to invest in the company that you're working for, or, especially if you're an owner in it, but you can end up in situations where, something happens and now all of that work, can disappear relatively quickly or be dramatically changed. And I think for me, one kind of the way that I've always thought about stuff is there's kind of another funny example, but do you guys ever play I'm really not that much of a gamer, but it's really coming across that way. But did you guys ever play Diablo?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So you know how you have like the belt with potions?
Mm-hmm.
So I was always like scared to run out. So I had like all the potions in my belt, and then I had like my backup potions, and then my backup potions for my backup potions. And I was like multiple tiers of like levels. And if one of those got below, I was always, nervous about it. And so that's kind of where I come from as far as, wanting to make sure that I'm never going to really drop below kind of these like key thresholds. And so kind of to the point before about, just when you first start working or, you get a raise and you just take a chunk of that. It's like my philosophy around this stuff has been, once I get to a certain level, I'm going to do everything I can to never drop below that. Whether that's like in an account balance, whether that's like the amount that I'm saving, whether that's my income level, all these things. Like I always want to just be like leveling up. And so I think when it comes back to, a stock ownership plan and these types of things, that's can be certainly helpful, but there's other areas too to not necessarily forget about. And so making sure, that you're putting in some energy or effort or taking advantage of all the resources that you have, because there are reasons why, the government incentivizes you to do certain things. And if you can leverage that to your advantage, why not take advantage of that?
Yep. Totally.
Yeah, it's almost like setting goals, right? Like you'll set a goal for, whatever, like a career advancement or just, like how big your business is if you're a business owner. And like even before you get to that goal, you'll elevate the goal so it's further out. So it just drives you to keep going. I mean, you can do the same thing with your finances and investments too.
Kind of make like a game out of it, something to chase.
Yep.
Yeah.
Definitely. And I think, I think a lot of what holds people back too is it doesn't seem like that much. I remember, I first started saving, I don't know what it was, $100 a month or something like that. And it was like, this is nothing. I have like $2,000 to my name, or, that first 1,000 was like a big deal. And then when I hit 10,000, it was like, oh my gosh, like, wow. And then I started thinking about it and it was like, well, I can't buy a car with that, or not a very good car. I can't buy a house with that. I can't, you could take a nice trip, but not like a super nice trip. And that's like all of my money. And so it was like, how am I ever going to get anywhere? And then so it was like, now I have $100,000 and, and it keeps going from there. And it's like, it happens quickly. And again, I think where people get stuck is like, they don't think that it's going to be worth it because they're kind of just stuck in, well, one, these things are exponential, and so when you start to realize that, it kind of changes the ball game. But so they don't do anything. And it's like, if you can just start doing something, it's way easier to build on that moving forward. And you'll be surprised at how quickly those things happen, or how quickly, if you don't do it, it's like 5 years later and you're like, wow, nothing's really that different.
Yeah. And some people just keep, I think, resetting themselves before it really starts to take off, like before they hit that really steep curve and see that those gains are just like not worth it, or fear of missing out, or you only get one life, blah, blah, and then like, oh, we're gonna buy this, or the next big idea comes by, it's like, oh, we should purchase this car, and you just keep kind of like going backwards. It's like, just let it ride for a little longer, like trust the process, and then really good things happen. Like stop resetting yourself.
Yeah, so there's a pretty cool I don't know if it's a philosophy or strategy out there, I guess. Are you guys familiar with, were you familiar with like FIRE, like financial independence, retire early?
No. Yeah.
No? Okay. Well, so there's like a whole like community or culture around, it's called FIRE. But then there's like all these like sub versions of that in different styles. And so the whole point of that is like, you basically save a lot, invest a lot early on, and then, you can basically retire early. But there's another version of that. It's called Coast FIRE, Coast Financial Independence. And that was a really cool concept when I found out about that, because basically if time is your biggest ally in these things. And so the sooner you can start and the more work you can do on the front end, the less you're going to have to do on the back end. And so there's basically a number, if you take whatever your annual expenses are, what you want them to be, and if you times that by 25 is kind of a good benchmark. So if you take how much money you want to have to spend or that you want to make, times that by 25, that gives you, roughly what you need to have kind of invested as far as a nest egg to be able to live off of those assets. And that's related to like the 4% withdrawal rule. But if you can accumulate a certain amount of assets early enough and you have enough time for them to grow, then you can actually hit that point early on, and then you can basically stop saving or investing. And so, I don't have a number off the top of my head, but like potentially, you can, have $250,000 saved by the time you're 35, And then, that's going to grow over time to basically get you to that point where you can retire off that, but you don't even have to save anymore after that. And so that concept was pretty powerful as well to realize like how important or what you can do early on by making good decisions. And then you basically put yourself in a position where you have much more flexibility and freedom. And, I'm less at this point in time about, retiring early per se. I think it's, I want to be doing stuff. I want to, have kind of purpose and, I like, working on certain types of things. But I want to be able to do that on my own terms. And so to be able to have that kind of financial flexibility, financial freedom from that standpoint. And then, if you're not trying to save for retirement anymore, like that frees up a lot of cash. Mm-hmm. And so then, you can do a lot of different things with that. And that kind of opens the door to a lot of other possibilities.
Yeah. Yeah. I think one of the things that people should focus on too, and I don't know if you agree with this, but like just not having the best of every, like you think that you need to buy the next thing that's coming out like all the time, right? So say like like you're into shoes maybe, right? And you need the next that next model comes out, gotta buy it. It's the best. I know nothing about shoes, whatever. I just kind of chose it, right? But it's like, you got to start looking at all these things. Like, are you operating on a coal budget, a coal income, and but your mindset is like diamonds, right? And it's like I gotta have those the next great thing. It's like really take a hard look at what you're chasing, and it's kind of about what is that giving you? Is it giving you like temporary happiness and like a temporary like, oh, that feels really good, and then it's like, oh, I have 1,000 shoes, but now I feel like shit, and the next time I buy a pair of shoes, then I'll feel good again. It's like, I don't know. You're chasing this feeling rather than like aligning where you're going with who you really are, and it's at the expense of all of your cash flow, like all your income. It's like, I don't know. I don't know if you guys think about that.
Do you guys know? Do you know who Ramit Sethi is?
No.
He's like a financial guru, or whatever you want to call it. But he that was one of the first kind of financial books I read. And it was called "I Will Teach You to Be Rich," and cringy title, but a lot of good principles and thoughts in there. But he talks about like exactly what you're saying. Of what happens is people, especially as they start to make more money, they think, oh, I deserve this, or I should be able to buy these things. And so they start spending a lot of money in a lot of areas. But in reality, there's really only, a couple of things that are really, most important to people. And it's not that you can't, pay $1,000 for a pair of shoes or whatever it is that's your thing. Maybe it's eating out, you like to eat out at, nice places. But you can't do that in all areas. Or you probably shouldn't do that in all areas. And so, and that's kind of where a lot of the money ends up going kind of accidentally. And so if you really break it down and say, okay, what are like kind of the categories of the things I spend money on, and which of those is actually really important to me? Is it shopping? Is it shoes? Is it eating out? Is it travel? Is it spending money on my kids, or my family, or these types of things? And try to pick, one category, maybe two, of like, that's what you're going to splurge on. Like, that's when you're going to do the luxury things. But then, be pretty considerate of those other areas and figure out how you can reduce your expenses in those. And so it's like, if you can 4x what you spend on, one particular category, like that, like imagine what that could be. Like, that's wild. But the only way you're going to be able to do that is if you kind of limit everything else and not just overinflate your entire lifestyle.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That's where I was getting at. It's just like there's too many little things that you're spending. You could spend a little bit of money on a whole lot of things and you're still broke, or you could spend, a lot of money on just a couple of things and still be broke. It's somewhere in the middle. It's like, okay, I get to splurge on a couple of things, not all the money, but then you've taken care of all these other little tiny things that you spend $1 million on every month, and now you can refocus that into wealth generation and stuff like that. So.
Yeah, it's really, like death by 1,000 cuts. And I think, again, it just goes back to most people either don't want to think about it, or they just don't really think about this stuff too much. And so that's something that I really work with a lot of people on is like, hey, let's be a little more intentional with this. And it's not that you can't have these things, but let's figure out how you can like sustainably do that. Because if it's not sustainable, then like you're not getting ahead. You're going the wrong direction. And most people don't really want that. So you're going to have to make some sacrifices, but you don't have to give up everything. And let's figure out how to make that work. And when you actually kind of dial in and look at the numbers, and that's one of my favorite things to do, is I bring all the data in, look at all these things, and like figure out how to make it all work. And it's a really cool like problem solving, kind of experience where it's like figure out, okay, this is all the things they told me, and this is what we got to do, and this is how we can do all that. So now here's the plan, and this is how you can get the things you said. You're just going to have to, do these other things over here to make sure that we can actually get the goals that you're looking to achieve.
Mm-hmm. I think you're in the right space for that too. If you lean really hard in the engineering thing, it's like, people are going to want to like, oh yeah, let's get the data together. Let's, I don't know, make a plan, take the next step, reach the next goal. I think, engineers might be more inclined to that, I think, than, I don't know, someone who doesn't want anyone to see the numbers. Like, I don't want you to see what I spend my money on, so.
Yeah, engineers are an interesting breed from that standpoint. I talked to a lot of other, financial advisors, and a lot of them don't like working with engineers because engineers ask too many questions.
Yeah, right.
And they really dig into it. And that's one thing I've noticed about myself and kind of been talking to other engineers and then people that are not engineers. It's like we're difficult to work with because we need to understand things. And so if you can explain it to me, great. Like, then go do whatever, it is. But if you can't explain it to me, then like, I'm not going to trust you.
Yeah. Some of the intangible stuff, it's going to get really lost with engineers, and they're just like, yeah, I don't trust you, man. if you're like, I promise it's going to do well for you. I promise you're going to get, no. I don't want promises. I want to know step 1, step 2, all the data. I want you to prove it to me right now. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's funny.
Yeah, one of the similar situation when I first started doing this, I got a financial planning software, and so there's a handful of different softwares out there that advisors use to kind of run simulations and retirement projections and these types of things. And I was like, I don't fully understand what's going on here. Like, it's kind of a black box. And then the parameters that I can adjust, like there's not enough variability in that. Like, I want to be able to manipulate these parameters to run these different conditions. So I just like built my own thing in Excel because it was like, I can understand this and I can explain it. And if I'm going to like tell somebody with confidence, like these big things about what they should or shouldn't be doing with their money, or, the ramifications of that, or, getting to retirement and, making decisions on like how much money can I actually afford to like pull out of my portfolio. It's like, I want to have a lot of confidence to be able to tell people that. And so, yeah, I think that's how engineers think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and those software companies, I mean, they do that on purpose, right? They don't want you to be able to manipulate everything, because then they're going to realize, oh, well, you don't need this software, so you can just do it in Excel. So yeah, that is super funny. So we do want to respect your time. So before we kind of wrap this up with some questions, I do want to make sure that you let the listeners know where they can get a hold of you, contact you, use your services, etc.
Yeah. Well, so I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. I post there, just about every day, and so that's probably the best place. So Ryan Sullivan, PE. There's a lot of Ryan Sullivans out there, but I think I'm the only one on LinkedIn, I guess, with the PE at the end. So you can find me there. Also, my website. So my company is Off the Beaten Path Financial. So website is obpfinancial.com. And then I've got an email newsletter as well. And so if people want to kind of stay in touch, or, I send out periodic insights and different things with that. I've got a lot of resources on my website too, with blog posts, and got a spreadsheet on there and an ebook and some other things. So, but LinkedIn is definitely the best place to kind of connect. And then, website if you want to check out more.
Awesome. Yeah, we'll throw those in the show notes. So it's an easy click for everyone who wants to check you out. So we do ask a couple general questions at the end of our interviews here. I am actually mixing mine up this time around.
Oh man.
I know.
Ooh.
And
Gonna confuse everybody.
yeah, so it's a new one. Um, so from your perspective, and the things that you've learned in your career, and then kind of the things that you're doing now, what makes an impactful engineer?
Yeah, I mean, impact can be a lot of different things for a lot of different people. And so I think that at the end of the day, like you have to kind of define that for yourself. Um, you know, and I think that's one of the hardest things, that people kind of realize at some point in life is like I just have to figure this out, like there is no kind of playbook, there is no one solution. And so you really have to kind of do that kind of search internally to figure out, what's important to you, what impact do you want to have, how do you want to live, what do you want to be known for? And, I think for me, like there was another kind of impactful experience. I remember my my grandfather's funeral, and there was a lot of people there. And I was like, I want there to be a lot of people at my funeral, like that to me that kind of shows like I meant something, I impacted people's lives. People cared about me, they're sad that I'm gone. And so that's been something, I guess the way that I look at it is like I want to leave an impact. I want to impact people's lives. I want to make a difference in that regard. And so when I started my firm, the mission that I set out was basically to help 100 families, achieve financial freedom. And it's like if I can look back and say that I did that, like I would feel good about that. I would feel like I had an impact. I would feel like I made a difference.
That's an awesome answer. I love it.
That was a good one.
Yeah.
So what's the mix up here, Steve? Was that it?
Yeah.
Was that it?
That's the new question. I think it
That's a
has
good
a
one.
lot more impact and value for our audience, because we're going to get a lot of perspective.
What was the one you asked before? It was like, where do you see yourself in 5 years
Yeah.
or something like that?
Yeah.
It's a good question, but I understand why we're turning to the impact. That's a good one. The who cares what Ryan's doing in 5 years? We want to know what kind of impact he's gonna make. No, that's a good question. Yeah, mine's gonna stay the same. So sorry. I want everybody to be able to walk away with, hopefully they've like taken a note or two if they've had a concept come by or an idea that they can pursue a little bit. Hopefully they've written that down or will remember to actually look into it. When the show ends, get on Google and look it up and just see what you can do. But if there was one thing that you could leave somebody with that you would think would be the biggest turning point or maybe just the next step that they could execute right away, maybe every day, maybe it's a habit or something. But what would you say you could leave someone with to go execute on?
Yeah, I think probably the biggest kind of tip I would give in that regard is to set up a cash flow system, like have some intentionality with how your finances run. A lot of people have just like a single checking account and then maybe a savings account. And it's like all the money goes in and out. And I mean, I guess if it works for you, then that's great. But most of the people I talk to, like they struggle with that. Like there's doubt, there's confusion, uncertainty around like, when does this bill come out? Like, do I have enough money for this? And I think having that peace of mind to just know, like that's probably been one of the biggest things for me is, to be able to just make purchases or do different things with literally zero regard financially for it, because I already had a plan for it and I already and even unexpected things, And so I think if you can set up a system so that your income goes to these different areas, buckets, categories, whatever you want to call them, to align with your goals, and you just start doing that, and then you're going to have the money there in these different places when you need it. And I think that's probably the biggest thing that people can do to help, really kind of streamline and clarify and get that peace of mind when it comes to their finances.
Yeah, dude, that's so good. Like to be able to go, I'm spending this money right now. And your thought is not, oh man, I wonder if I should be spending this money. The fact that you have the money and that you get to go spend it means you've already accounted for it. Like
Right.
that's such a great feeling. I've been there before. I'm not really there now, but I've been there before and it's really good. And I would say like, guys, go out and just, because we used to have to track incoming, outgoing, this bill, keep receipts, put in balance a checkbook, balance this ledger. Like we you used to have to write everything down or else you would literally not know. I could sign into my bank and go, oh, print me a statement. It shows everything I spent, ins and outs and all that stuff. So I don't have to write anything down. But what that leads to now is like spending money without regard and really not knowing the impact you have on your own finances by what you're doing every day, and you don't even realize it. So just don't like go from not ever tracking anything to like tracking everything, because then you'll quit, because you got to take one step at a time. But start heading in that direction and eventually try to get yourself some categories of what you're spending your money on, and just see if you put it into a pie chart, what's the largest chunk. And does that largest chunk make sense? Should this other chunk be a little smaller part of the pie? And just start kind of manipulating a little bit. And it'll just bring that awareness. Like, hey, I really didn't know that I was like spending 30% on groceries. Maybe I shouldn't buy steak all the time from the top shelf from the freaking butcher shop. Like, maybe I should do some chicken from the grocery store. Maybe I should, it's like, you'll literally start seeing these huge chunks and you're like, okay, how could I be spending that much money on these things? But yeah, don't try to do it all at once if you're really at that 0 point, but try to get, in that direction. And then you can start having that freedom where it's like, I have the money, I can actually spend it. And I know I've got everything else covered. So and like you said, plus the emergencies too, because you have an emergency fund, right? So,
because it's not if, it's when.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I used to be brutal about it. Like, I'm much nicer now. But people would come to me and be like, man, talking to me about money problems. And just like, oh, my car broke down. I don't have the money to get the brakes. And I'm like, well, where's your emergency fund? And then that was the end of the conversation. Because they did not like that at all. I'm like, where's your rainy day fund?
That's the whole behavioral part of this, job, is that you can't just tell people that because they just walk away and like, well, that guy isn't going to help me,
Right. I've learned a lot since then, so. But, yeah, go out there, put some of this stuff in action, guys. And visit Ryan's website and follow up in the show notes with all the tools that he's got for you. Like, take one of them, dive in, see how it works for you. Maybe get a call going, even if you don't think that the finances are that important to you right now, they are. At any point in time, they are. And at any point in time is the time to start. And we'll check you guys later.
Thanks, Ryan.
Thanks for coming on, Ryan.
Yeah, thank you.
Hey, guys. I hope you had a great time listening. Maybe you learned something new. Maybe you got inspired. Or at least took one thing away that you'd be able to use. Maybe you just had a good laugh. Impactful Engineering's hope and mission is that through this podcast, we can play a small part in expanding the reach and awareness of engineering and all of its many areas of application. The multiple engineering career paths available can be hugely rewarding as part of a fulfilled life, creating opportunity to impact nearly everyone in the modern world. An engineer's work helps to foster creation of new technologies, create safe and comfortable environments in which people can work, and lends to the sustainable future of everyone on the planet. The world needs more impactful engineers. Our vision is to provide engineers with the perspective and the tools to allow themselves the opportunity to become the most impactful engineers they can be. Included in our vision is to grow the impactful engineering community to a point where we can provide full ride scholarships to students in every single U.S. state every single year. This is an enormous goal, and with your help, we can get there. To start, we will continue to execute this mission in the way that we know how. Having conversations, telling stories, and talking about what we find interesting and are passionate about. If the episode made you think, made you object, made you think you could possibly be doing something more with your day, or brought about an idea that you could spend more time on developing further, please share the show or recommend it to your friends. Even if you didn't personally think it was a huge help, there may be someone that you know that could benefit from it, and that's all we can ask for. Until next time on the Impactful Engineer Podcast.